RGM Deep Dive. The roundtable is about driving profitable growth across the value chain, obviously for CPG, retail, and beverage perspectives. Uh, Welcome again. I'm Saurabh Singh. I lead the CPG retail practice for Polestar Analytics. And today I'm joined by three prolific speakers. And let me start by introducing each one of them. And I'll start with Kelly. So Kelly is Global Vice President for RGM, Data Science, and Anti-Counterfeit at BIC. She brings over 25 years of transformational leadership experience in revenue growth management, blending deep CPG expertise with cutting-edge data science capabilities. At BIC, she leads global RGM strategy while pioneering the integration of data science and anti-counterfeit initiatives. A combination which is rarely seen, honestly, but it's obviously, I'm sure, reshaping how brands protect and grow revenue. Her 2-decade tenure at the Coca-Cola Company showcased her ability to scale RGM from regional to global initiatives, leading strategies that drove billions in revenue. Known for bridging the gap between complex analytics and practical outcomes, Kelly is also a strong advocate for women in business, serving as an executive sponsor for BIC's Women's Empowerment Program and an active member of Chief. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Next up is Jason Milano. He's Vice President, Revenue Strategy and Analytics for GoToFoods. Jason blends traditional CPG RGM expertise with modern data-driven strategies for the food delivery and restaurant tech space. At GoToFoods, he navigates the challenges of multi-brand restaurant operations and digital commerce, playing RGM strategies in an environment where data is real-time and margins are thin. With 13 plus years at Coca-Cola, including VP roles for major retailers like Target and Kroger, Jason has led billion-dollar revenue negotiations and omni-channel RGM programs. His ability to pivot classical RGM frameworks for emergent business models makes him a valuable thought leader in the evolution of commercial strategy. I'm pretty inspired by his journey from Coca-Cola to a professional services firm where he was leading AI ML driven initiatives for CPG firms, and from there to fast food, go to restaurants, which is more of GoToFoods, which is more of a fast-moving and fast-paced, culture and the space. We would definitely be able to gain a lot of value drive from Jason's presence over here. Next up is Hunt Brada, Director, Revenue Growth Management and Strategic Pricing at Opella. Hunt leads enterprise-wide pricing and RGM strategy at Opella, leveraging over a decade of experience in sales strategy, category management, and data analytics. His work focuses on building foundational RGM capabilities from pricing frameworks and promotional optimizations to unlocking multi-million-dollar revenue opportunities with key retailers. Having held strategic roles at Sanofi, Kind, and Philips, Hunt combines analytical rigor with commercial storytelling. With a strong foundation in consumer insights, an MBA, and a collaborative approach to problem solving, he's spearheading Opella's shift towards data-driven growth in a highly competitive marketplace. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Let's dive in. My first question goes to Hunt. Hunt, setting the foundation right is often the hardest part when RGM capabilities from the ground up has to be built. Where do you begin and how do you ensure long-term scalability is there from day one?
Thank you. That's a great question. So there's really two main components that could really help with the long-term success, right? And it's executive sponsorship and organizational buy-in. Now, these are not necessarily the same thing. From an executive sponsorship standpoint, you're looking for a leader that's going to help influence organizational KPIs or macro business level strategies to really help embrace that RGM culture. An example of this that I've worked with is moving an organization from a top line organization to a net sales EBIT organization, which is really kind of critical for the RGM space. From the organizational buy-in, these are the people I work with every day. So I look to make the effort to kind of go across the aisle, so to speak, to get their perspective on projects and not only integrate RGM into their work, but integrate their work into my work. So really long-term success begins and ends with partnership across the entire organization and within the team itself.
No, definitely, totally agree. Getting the basics right upfront makes all the difference, right? it's not the flashiest part, but I know
Yeah.
setting up the strong foundation has everything built up on it becomes stronger and stronger. Uh, Moving on to my next question, which goes to Kelly. Kelly, you are uniquely positioned leading RGM, data science, and anti-counterfeit. These three areas traditionally operate in silos. I haven't seen anywhere else wherein all these three areas will be combined into one position. Now, how has integrating these functions revealed new opportunities for revenue protection and growth that most of the companies might be missing?
Right. So thank you for asking. It may not be intuitive, but we at BIC think that RGM is a fact-based decision-making capability. So data science allows us to make fact-based decisions quicker. It does the hard work for us, and it's really advancing our capability quicker. When we think about counterfeit products, counterfeit disrupts our ability to build a pricing strategy, have a promotion strategy, have a really strong relationship with our customers. So by bringing them into the RGM Center of Excellence, we're able to then think about how do we offset that disruption? How do we think about the pricing strategy that we're putting in place? And we have more visibility to the disruptions that's happening in the marketplace. So it allows us to forecast better, to have an upfront conversation with our customers, to think about the ways we can partner internally with supply chain or with our sales organization to really bring a holistic RGM approach and strategy to life with fact-based decision making and really trying to reduce the disruption in the marketplace.
Well, thank you, Kelly. I think that's super interesting because combining all of these, which are traditionally all run in separate lanes, right? I think it definitely brings out many unknown unknowns into the process. And while you're working with retailers, working with your backend suppliers, also it brings out the value. It brings out the areas wherein you can drive a lot of value. And love how this integration shifts the focus from just control to proactive value creation. Uh, that is new to me, and I'm definitely going to learn more about it from you later on. Moving on to Jason. Jason, you've transitioned, as I was saying earlier, from traditional RGM at Coca-Cola to revenue strategy in the food service delivery space. Uh, how are you adapting your classical RGM principles to navigate the unique challenges of the food economics and digital first customer relationships?
Yeah, well, the unique thing is the foundations of RGM really remain the same. So you look at pricing, promotions, price pack architecture, mix management, trade investment, and route to market. So that's highly transferable when you start to look at it, right? And you have minor changes that come in. What used to be a planogram to me in CPG days is now a menu, right? And so you have that transition. Where I think there's the biggest difference at this point in time is you're significantly closer to the guest. And the guest also has a wealth of choices that are actually available to them in the marketplace. When I was in the CPG world, I was focused on how people shopped at Target and how to actually win a little bit more of their fair share of pie. Here, I'm competing against numerous other choices and really thousands of choices when you look at either your phone, you try to survey your local area, etc. And how do we make our brands a consideration set for you? And so really what that comes down to for us is that we really need to cut through with the guests by being present with the right offerings in the right locations with the right value proposition to turn that guest into a loyal guest for us. And this really goes down to the personal relationship that we're able to create with the guest, from how you engage with them while they're in home or even out of home examining options, to how that virtual or in-store experience comes to life for them, and then to the quality of the food that they have at that point in time. And then lastly, really around how you continue to surprise and delight them to further gain their loyalty and their repeat business.
I think it's so cool to hear, I don't have to relearn a lot of things. My basic understanding of RGM still holds, even if the space is a bit changed. I understand, in the CPG world, the pack price channel is shifting in case of GoToFoods, might be shifting to menu architecture or delivery economics for that matter. But I love it when when you're mentioning that classical RGM principle still hold, just that the contextualization has to be done in a proper manner. Uh, that's so great to hear. I'm sure the audience would be loving this conversation right now. Next question, I would ask in pairs. So Kelly and Hunt, both of you can answer this question, and anyone can start. But you both have worked extensively with global brands, but come from different implementation philosophies, maybe. Uh, Kelly, you evolved RGM within an established system at Coca-Cola, while Hunt is building foundational RGM from ground up at Opella. How do you approach the classic challenges of balancing local market nuances with global consistency? And what have you learned so far about when to standardize versus when to customize?
Sure. So Han, I'll go and turn it over to you. So building on Jason's comment, the foundations and the principles of RGM really don't change whether you're global or building a local capability. For me, managing the center of excellence, standardization is key. But we all have to realize that RGM is executed in the local market with your customers in the store where the rubber meets the road. So we build our standardized tools capabilities with freedom in a framework, because as Jason mentioned, the route to market may change. So you may have a distributor market, or you may have a direct sell market, and you have to be able to adapt your standardized approach, your principles and foundations to that route to market. So we call it freedom within a framework. The KPIs don't change from global to local. The foundation and the capabilities don't change. The tools may tweak a little bit so that we can understand value to the distributor or value to the retailer. But in general, the local versus global, we don't have a whole lot of challenges in that. The one challenge I would tell you that is something to really be aware of is the not invented here complex. Everybody thinks they're special, better, different. And really, if you break it all down, it goes back to the principles are the same. So keep it as simple as you can, build that standardization, and allow local market customization.
Sure. Hunt?
Kelly, that's an excellent point. And to build on that, I think we also need to understand where the global markets are in their RGM journey. So for some of the companies I've worked for, the US is more developed, right? We have some skill sets and capabilities and tools. It's also a very data-rich country, right? Not all countries have the same go-to-market, especially when you're talking about pharmacies in the US and in Europe are two very different things. So understanding that there are those nuances and not all tools or all methodologies will necessarily apply, but ensuring that, again, you have those standard fundamentals nailed down, and then you can tweak them to the local markets. But I think as we're all saying, the principles don't really change. It's how you go about analyzing them, executing them, and recommending them to tailor it to the local markets. I think another good thing that some global companies will do is they'll have a global RGM forum, and so that we can all get together and discuss, cross learnings, what's worked in some markets, what hasn't in others, and just to kind of have all boats rise with the tide, so to speak. So certainly managing local and global nuances is important, and just as important as managing local and global priorities.
Right. I think I like this point wherein you're saying, aligning with the principles and not just the templates, right? That really sticks. I think it's clear that smart RGM would need structure and flexibility at the same time to adapt as well for newer markets, data-rich markets, wherein data is not so much. You might have to go on gut sometime, or you're reliant on third-party data. I think that's a good point. And also, it was good to hear from both of you in terms of different spectrum of perspectives on building from scratch versus evolving within a legacy system like Coca-Cola. I think it's always a tightrope walk between empowering the markets and maintaining a common language, if I can say so, to make the decisions. Yep. All right. Next question is for Kelly and Jason. Since both of you have worked with Coca-Cola and you have that DNA, right, but now operate in a very different context. Kelly, you're working in a traditional CPG, and Jason is in food space, right? How has your Coca-Cola experience shaped your approach to RGM, and what assumptions have you had to unlearn also and adapt in your current roles?
Jason,
Yeah,
you want to go
Kelly,
first?
yeah, I'll go first. Sure. For me, I will say within Coca-Cola, I was lucky enough to have experiences across warehouse, DSD, fountain category, marketing, and franchise. And so it really taught me how to win, whether or not you're the leader, you're the fighter, or you're even launching a brand new brand like Fairlife into the market. And so how to develop strategies where you're really rooted in the consumer or the guest at that point in time. Where I've really had to adapt and evolve, and I'd say it's more adapt and evolve, less unlearn, is data has just been prolific in the industry in terms of the number of data sources that are now available. And really over the last 10 years, you think about the access that you have today just through your phone and your computer, over the internet and social media, the ordering options that now exist for you to be able to engage with your local restaurant, and then all the different loyalty programs that you're a part of that, kind of incentivize you to come back in, kind of just to name a few things that we look at. And what that's really done for us is further the need for AI within RGM. And for myself, I'll say, you kind of mentioned it, Saurabh, in the beginning, like I saw where the puck was going into the data landscape. And so, when I decided to leave Coca-Cola, the goal was, how do I learn AI? And how do I understand how to build AI systems from the ground up in order to then really access or monetize data effectively in large organizations? And now within my team today, we're bringing that together across things like our revenue strategy, how we examine the consumer, and how we leverage our data science, just like Kelly had mentioned, to really change the way that data is monetized within retail. And, this comes with how we build foundational data to then the models that we put in place that allow us to accelerate insights, going from insights to action and then prescription within our business, so that we can actually drive better productivity and greater business decisions that will drive a true ROI for our business.
Yeah, and like Jason, I have the benefit of a very broad experience at Coca-Cola. So from customer marketing, I worked on the bottler side, I worked on the company side, food service and retail, before going into a global role. So I have a really wide span of view, so to speak, and understanding of how we implemented RGM at Coca-Cola. So I wouldn't say I really had to unlearn anything, but I was able to, as I moved to BIC, kind of learn from what was working really well at Coca-Cola and adapt it for a smaller company that really didn't understand what RGM was other than pricing. So we were able to build on what Coca-Cola has done as a leader in the RGM space and really kind of adapt it for our own make and model and approach to business. And it's been very successful because I was able to know what worked really well at Coca-Cola and adapt that, but understand where we had challenges at Coca-Cola and kind of steer around those, so to speak, in making it less complex at BIC, because we're not as complex of a go-to-market model as Coca-Cola. So I was able to simplify the approach a little bit more, and having very clear, very similar but clear pillars of RGM around pricing, price pack architecture, promotion, winning with customers or trade, and building a model around that with strong KPIs that the entire organization could adopt. So I really credit my experience at Coca-Cola for building the confidence in me to take what I've learned and shape a new and improved or different approach at BIC. So all the credit goes back to my friends and family at KO.
No, definitely. I think companies like Coca-Cola and, with such structure and such mature RGM processes, it must have been like going to a school, learning all of that, create a framework in your mind, and then when you go forward in life to some other companies, you can actually contextualize it and then implement it over there. I'm sure You guys must have gained a lot from that experience. Uh, Next question is to Hunt and Jason. Hunt, you are developing RGM capabilities at Opella, while Jason operates in the fast-paced world of food service. Now, how do the pace and complexity of decision making differ between traditional CPG and a dynamic delivery models? And what lessons can each industry borrow from the other?
Hunt, please go first.
Thank you very much. We'll answer in order of the question. So from a CPG perspective, the pace and complexity really kind of depends on market conditions as well as the business outlook. I think at the beginning of the year, we all have these plans that we have pre-identified objectives. We're going to phase throughout the year, these really good plans. But like Mike Tyson says, right, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Right. So like as the year progresses, there's going to be fires. There's going to be customer negotiations that are challenging. There's going to be pandemics, right? There's going to be things that happen that really upset the apple cart. That's going to lead to we need to make decisions fast. And so the way I typically manage that is through both prioritization to understand what are the decisions that need to happen, either in sequential order or that are going to have the biggest impacts to the business. But then also I try to work with everybody. And that's not to kind of spread the decision making, but I need that input, right? I'm a subject matter expert within the RGM space. I don't know what conversations are happening with the buyer at X account, right? Sales strategy might have a much larger view. Sales has a different view. Finance probably has a very different view, right? And ensure that we have that cross-functional communication to kind of get right the best business result that we can that is almost pre-aligned with the functions that it impacts, not only creates a faster decision, but generally a better result and aligned risk tolerance that goes along with it. So if things don't work out, we're aware of how we got there.
Yeah, and I mean, just to build off of what Hunt's saying, like it doesn't differ too much. I think in my old world at Coca-Cola, internal decisions take time. The external decisions are expected in a very rapid pace.
Yeah.
And so I was blessed with some great folks within my teams that knew how to master the art of calculated decision making and how to really be expert planners. And so as we went into the year, we were planned with scenario A, scenario B, scenario C. And to Hunt's point, once you get punched in the mouth, which typically was about the end of January, you would figure out very quickly that, the next 11 months need to change. And then even sometimes after quarterly results come out for your customer, results change again and your plan needs to change again. And so being agile and nimble within that really relates to your ability to execute the best priorities within RGM up front. I'll say probably the two biggest lessons that I see kind of looming in the future for companies right now in different industries that they can kind of learn from each other is really around, number one, how to effectively leverage the Trevor Trove of data to impact the business in a favorable way, which could be revenue, profit, or productivity. The second, and Kelly talked about this earlier in the chat, but how do you make the complex simple? Because you have this huge wealth of data and you're going to do analysis paralysis on it. I saw it with my teams in the past. And you don't want to get caught up in that swirl because you're never going to make a decision or implement a strategy. And so you have to make that complex very simple to be able to understand the action that needs to be taken and then how to go implement that action very effectively and fast.
No, understood. Yeah, but again, what I'm hearing is that you need to contextualize the way you want to work in your space. It could be a food space, it could be a typical CPG space, but I think the fundamentals and speed of decision might vary, but it's there, right? I think the way you mentioned, Jason, at your earlier company, the internal decisions might take time. The external ones have to be taken, very quickly. But in your current, space, GoToFoods, it might be that you have to take decisions at both the places very, very quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we're constantly operating long-term, short-term, right? How do we plan effectively for the next 24 months, but how do we
Yes.
still win, with a consumer that's constantly evolving? You have so many pressures sitting on the consumer today, whether or not it's macroeconomic factors, it's, the cost of living within their area, it's the, how much they have in a paycheck. I mean, we're seeing a very strong split between how consumers are really, shifting into savings more effectively, and that actually means that there's less to go into the marketplace. And so you have to be top of mind with those consumers, and how do we react pretty quickly through ways of like personalized pricing to really engage that consumer long term.
No, definitely. So, Kelly, next up is a question to you on the on the data science side. So, how do you integrating data science into your traditional RGM processes? Uh, uh, are you actually doing it? And if you're doing it, is it at scale?
Yep. So let me talk a little bit about how we think about data science. We think about it on like a spectrum. So we think about it in 4 key capabilities. Descriptive, I think that's what happened. Diagnostic, why did it happen? Predictive, what is going to happen or what will happen? And then prescriptive, what should I do about it? So just about every organization will have something in all 4 of those buckets. Your dashboards and your KPIs fall in that descriptive and that diagnostic. You're analyzing on those all the time, understanding what happened and why did it happen. And when you get diagnostic and you start to move into predictive, that's the forecasting that you're doing. Most organizations are doing some sort of short-term, long-term, and even innovation forecasting. So data science plays a key role for us in that. And then when you get from the start to straddle predictive and prescriptive, that's where we're really incorporating AI. We're teaching the organization how to write and think about prompts, how to help the data science and the AI capability really work for us. But for me, the key to data science goes back to the simplicity principle that I'm talking about, is helping the organization better understand what the data is saying. Because we have tons and tons of data, but if we don't turn that data into an insight that the organization can then go take action on or make a decision on, the data and the data science is useless. So it's really helping the organization understand what is the data telling us, and then what should we go do with it. So we try to break it down in that simple format so that we bring people along the journey. And we do have capabilities in all of them, and we're starting to move more into the predictive and the prescriptive, think scenario planning outside of your Excel that we've been doing for years and years and years. Into more predictive, what's going to happen in the promotion space? What happens if I invest with this customer? What is the industry, what are our industry reports or the category data tell us is going to happen in this channel with this customer, things like that. So, but it really takes building the understanding of your organization so that they don't doubt the data. When you have doubt in your data, you don't get the buy-in from the organization, or particularly the sales team, that you need in order to sell in a new idea or make a decision based on what the insights of that data are.
No, definitely. I think I like that, there's a shift from being a hindsight-driven company to a foresight-driven company, though hindsight is also very important to understand what has happened. But yes, more and more future-looking decisions have to be taken, and that's where data science can definitely help. And it's also, I think Jason and Hunt also mentioned it in their earlier answer. The scenario-based planning, right? It becomes very, very important to tune into different scenarios. What, changes at the back end, somewhere in the value chain, how does it going to impact your decisions in the market? I think that's where data science is going to play a huge role in the coming time, right? Jason, next question is to you. What AI-ready foundations are you putting in place to support real-time revenue decision making?
Yeah. What I can tell you is I'll probably lean a little bit more on my RCG experience in the kind of consumer in the services industry, but you have to start anytime that you're going into building capabilities for AI, you have to start with a strong data foundation. If you don't have this, you can't monetize your data, or it will be limited in how you in the monetization that you're going to get back. And where you really want to start to look at is things like data governance, because you want to ensure consistency on how data is viewed and how it's used within the organization. You also want to have a flexible data architecture. And that's so that you can tap into the best tools and solutions that are available in the marketplace over time. Because let's just put it this way, what exists today is not going to be the same technology that exists in the next 12 to 18 months. And so you have to be able to adapt your organization effectively. You want to really also make sure that you're having strong data harmonization across your data. CPGs face this as well as retail customers do, where you have a ton of products that have been set up in the past, maybe in my world through different POS systems. In Kelly's world, much more as I set them up in Target versus I set them up in Kroger. They're different naming conventions and a 12-digit UPC versus a 10-digit UPC. And those don't match all the way. And you need to have a system that enables it to match so that you have a clear single source of what your data truly is as you aggregate it up across your business. You also want to have a strong foundational data model that is embedded within your architecture to manage, as Kelly was talking about, the doubt in the data. This helps give you that single source of truth and ensure that your company can have access to data in a very quick and formal fashion as you start to build out, whether or not it's a medallion infrastructure that leads into a semantic layer that then can enable quick and easy access to reports, allow models to run effectively and fast, and you're driving insight to action and allowing yourself to then open up to new capabilities in the future. The other thing I would always recommend is having a roadmap and aligning that with where your data availability and readiness will be along the process, as well as where your North Star really wants to go in the future within your RGM platform. And so the idea is that you don't have to wait for all these steps in the process to be done. You can actually start to execute certain things as you get data up and running early on in the process so that you're not holding up that monetization pipeline. And then the last thing I'd probably say is that, you want to treat your data foundation or your infrastructure like a corporation. Every 12 to 18 months, you want to look at like a mini reorg within it. How do I continue to modify 10 to 15% in order to then establish new ways of working? Because my business is going to evolve. For us in the retail landscape, if you look at 1P, 3P ordering, that was a much smaller piece of the business 5 years ago, and today is continuing to dominate. And so, as that business shifts, you have to be prepared to, one, have that data more accessible, but have it also have it built into the right models so that you're ready to there and also be able to ingest it. And there's different ways of ingesting that, with just like ways of being on Databricks where you can delta share. So there's numerous ways to really leverage that foundation to continue to accelerate your business ahead.
That's so good to hear, somebody talking about clean and connected data before moving on to the AI/ML journey. When I go to my clients, they would talk about, what can you do for me on the agentic AI journey? I have to first of all ask them, what kind of data you have? Are you okay with their quality? Do you understand, if there are any issues or pain points on that side? First, let's, build a strong foundation and then move on towards these kind of things. And you rightly mentioned, Jason, there has to be a roadmap, right? There has to be things which are short, which you can achieve in short term, mid-term, longer term, and there would be data inconsistencies, there would be data redundancies, or data not available at all to do those things. Therefore, those have to be put into a long-term bucket once you are sorted with your data. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Hunt, from a foundational perspective, what's needed for a company to effectively adopt AI in RGM? And do you think, are there any barriers which you see, which appear very often to the companies?
Yeah. So we kind of keep recycling the same thing, which is really critical to RGM. You have to have the basics, right? And so when you think about these really sophisticated systems and you think about the output, the pace, the complexities of them, right? If you don't have the basics, it's almost like some TPM expression, right? Garbage in, garbage out. You might not understand if the recommendation is a good one. You might not have the foundational knowledge to say, okay, this negative ROI promotion, cut it, but that actually plays into maybe, a aggregated margin play, or we are doing it for X, Y, and Z very specific purpose, and we're okay with that. And so ensuring that you have that mindset within the organization and the process to evaluate that is kind of the critical component before you move into these systems. The other thing I would say from a barrier perspective is they're expensive. Some can be prohibitively expensive. And so for smaller companies or companies that are looking to get into the RGM space, you probably have a lot of low-hanging fruit out there that's ready to harvest, and you can do it with Excel, right? You can be resourceful within your organization. You can, manually pull data sets. Again, if you collaborate with your business partners, there's a lot of information that you can pull together and a lot of smart people that you work with that you can then leverage to drive these RGM processes in both the way to create value, but as a learning experience. You are going to make mistakes. It's going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. But as long as you learn from them and you understand why, right, and you do it maybe in like a lower risk tolerance and not with this system you paid, whatever millions of dollars for, you'll understand it. And so that way, when you elevate the organization to a point where they're ready for AI, you will maximize the value that you get out of it.
No, definitely. I think what you're saying is the groundwork needs to be done. You need to have data, good quality data. You need to have governance around it. And cross-functional alignment is really necessary because RGM is about working with different stakeholders. I think Kelly talked about it earlier. One thing that I feel is sometimes companies do feel a cultural resistance to the changes or adapting to the new tools and technologies. I think AI in RGM is also about, it's not only about tools and technologies, but also about the transformation or the change management in your respective companies. I'll move on to the next question. Thank you, Hunt, for that. And Kelly, this is to you now. What strategies do you use to get data science and commercial teams aligned in RGM efforts?
So this is a really, this is a really interesting and important question for me. So for my team, I put the onus on the my data science team to understand what's happening in the market. How many times are they in a store or in a restaurant or in a drugstore, helping them to build credibility with the commercial organization so that when they bring the commercial team along the journey, which is the key strategy in really getting an aligned result, we have to bring them along the journey. But when they know that the data science team has been out in the market and they saw, we're in back to school right now, they saw what's on the shelf at back to school, the data science team then has more credibility. From how do we get them aligned? We really bring the commercial team along the journey. So they're with us to take our forecasting process. They're with us from a category forecasting progress from the start to the finish. They understand the data we're using. They get a preliminary input. They're able to challenge that and say, and we then give the opportunity as a data science team to ask that we see this in the market. What else do we not see that may be happening in one channel is not happening in another, so that we can put those influences into outcomes that we're going to get out of the data. And we then take the insights, turn the data into insights and validate those with the commercial organization. So there's a back and forth to get to the right answer because the data is going to tell us the pure and simple facts of what's in the data, not necessarily what's happening in the marketplace, what are the influences we need to bring into the data to influence the outcome. So it's a real partnership, but the onus is on my data science team to get in the market and understand what's happening.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Kelly. One of my clients actually does that. They call it market day events, wherein people from finance or commercial teams who are not client facing or not going into the market. They go with sales folks into the market, visiting distributors, wholesalers, or outlet retailers, right? Who see and feel what is actually done in the market. And that's where they also come out with their own ideas from an outside in perspective. What use cases can they think of, and then they discuss with sales folks and say, this is the use case. Can we try it out in the data with the data science teams and see if you find any ROI on top of it? So the idea of co-creating those use cases, because now that you understand the corporate stuff and you also understand what's happening in the market, right? That actually brings in the value from that perspective, right? Uh, Jason, what team structures or cultural elements have helped you execute RGM cross-functionally?
Yeah, I think there's a few things to probably highlight, and I think Kelly touched on one of the points I'm about to talk about, which is number one. Yeah, we always tell our team, like, know your business, the industry, and the guest better than our competition does. And, that starts with, just like we were talking about, how do you get out in the stores and actually see how the business runs? How does the guest actually engage with our brands effectively? You have to understand that firsthand for whether or not you're creating, new pricing strategies, or in data science, creating the next model. How a cinnamon roll is made is significantly different than what you would ever think. And so you have to understand the process all the way through in order to effectively demand forecast. The second thing is a clear understanding of the North Star vision, because Hunt touched on this earlier, which is like, you got to get operational buy-in, right? And so by setting that North Star vision and laying out the plan on how you can get there, everyone across the organization and even within your team understands the goal and how that's quantified within the organization. The next point is really around everyone in the team has a voice. We don't care if you're a data scientist, if you're an RGM, if you're in consumer insights, if you're analytics. If you got an idea, speak up.
Yeah.
And what folks don't always realize is sometimes that smallest idea can turn into the largest idea and the biggest impact driver on your business. And so we always want to make sure that we're taking that in. And then the last thing, that we really preach within the team is test, learn, fail, scale. And you have to be agile and nimble within that and almost create that flywheel effect, so that you can continue to bring new innovation to the market or new learnings to the market. And not everything we do is going to hit it out of the park, but it's okay to fail as long as we learn from our failures.
No, definitely. Uh, I think last 17 odd minutes, I'll ask a couple of questions more and then open it up for the questions from the audience. Hunt, question to you, and I'm skipping a few questions which I would really want to ask, but this is an important one. Where do you see the biggest white space in RGM today that companies are still overlooking?
It's a good question, right? And I think from my experience, right, being with companies that are generally starting RGM functions, I can kind of speak to my level of experience. I highly advocate companies to hire diverse backgrounds, right, in terms of finance, category management, sales, to have that view and experience consolidated on one team. I work with a lot of great individuals on my team, Joel Handler, Kathy Belding, Karen Smith, they have tons of industry experience, and I tap into them every day. And so, to ensure that you have a very diverse background of experience and learnings can really accelerate the work that you're doing. It can elevate the work you're doing, but it will also help potentially cut through, any unintentional bias you may have towards a certain project or initiative with their history of success and learnings, right? So again, when I talk about being resourceful, that is not only data wise, that's also your peers and personnel and contacts within the company, right? We're all coming from a different position with different wins, different losses, and different learnings. And so let's leverage that in our current working environment, and really drive the business forward as effectively and efficiently as we can.
That's a great learning for all of us. One question for all three of you. The RGM And this is coming from the answer that you've just given, her. The RGM talent landscape is shifting, right? What new skills are you prioritizing in your teams that weren't on the radar, let's say 5 years back? And what advice would you give to cross-functional leaders looking to upskill in RGM?
Sure, I'll start there. So I would tell you, and I don't know that there are necessarily new skills, but they're becoming more important. The first for me is storytelling. Really being able to understand the data and turn it into an insight that your cross-functional peers, your sales organization, your customers can understand and influencing. So the two skills that I'm looking for when I'm adding to my team or trying to build skill sets within my team are storytelling and influencing. And I don't think that those skills will ever go away. As I think about cross-functional leaders and how to upskill to move into RGM or learn RGM is learn the business, understand how we go to market, put the commercial leader hat on, and really learn the business and understand the challenges that we face from customers.
That's a good one.
I think just to add on a couple things in addition to what Kelly said, but for me as well, it's really around how do we continue to understand how data science is evolving. As well as I would tell you data engineering. I see the need in the future where we probably need a data engineer that sits on our team that can, really ensure that we're organizing our data effectively, right? The next thing is also around the power of generative AI, as well as where agentic AI can help in the future. We encourage the use of it, within our teams today, whether or not it's for research or it's for coding. How do we ensure that we're leveraging the tools and capabilities that we have? We also want to ensure that we're fostering curiosity amongst our team, and that you kind of need in order to ensure that folks are constantly learning on themselves, because there's the stuff that we can bring to the table, but if they're also not actively curious and actively hungry, they're going to peak out at a certain point. So how do you find those folks that constantly want to continue to upskill themselves? And then the last thing is getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, just as a trait, and people that can live within it. Because one of the dirty secrets, I think, in this industry is everybody thinks that they want to get up to the point where I'm keeping pace with technology. 99% of the companies never will. It's accelerating faster than we can keep up. It's just more how comfortable can I be, and what are the results that I'm driving in the industry that are truly the measure of success.
Thank you. Right. I think, adding to those are excellent points, right? And I think for me, when I look at candidates, I focus a lot on soft skills, right? Hard skills you can teach, right? If somebody is willing to learn and they have a positive learning attitude, and again, to Jason's point, right, if they're driven to learn, you could teach them anything, right? But from a soft skill perspective, right, those are harder to come by, and they're harder to teach, right? Stakeholder management, storytelling is an excellent example. I struggled with that early in my career. My mentor, Peter Nauman, he actually sent me to a class to go learn and practice. And so stuff like that is critical, because again, you can teach anybody anything if they're willing to learn. I think another thing that is a little bit more out there is you need to be okay with ambiguity, right? You are not always going to we talked about how much data is out there. There's never enough, right? There's never the right system. There's never the right data. There's always inputs you won't know. But if you can get by understanding 80% of the problem and have the ability to navigate those conversations and be okay taking educated risks, right? Be okay coming to data-based conclusions when maybe you don't have the whole picture, but you can justify it in a very simple way, right? The way I like to think of it is, if I explain this to my mother, would she understand, right? That's usually my gatekeeping, right? And if I can't, right, I go revisit it. And so, right, I think those are the soft skills that I try to focus on, is who is this person? What is their kind of professional character, so to speak, and would that mesh well with the team and drive the business forward? Ultimately, whether it's through those soft skills or hard technical skills like AI management, where maybe there's a knowledge gap on my end as well.
Yeah, I think talking about moms and kids, you always have hard time
Yeah.
telling them what do you do for a living,
Yeah.
right? Okay, I would move to the questions from the audience, and I think there are uniquely, I could see three odd questions because time is less, but all three of them would pertain to one of you. I'll start with the first one, and it's for you, Jason. How do you manage RGM when consumer preferences shift rapidly due to social media trends or viral marketing in the food service space?
That's a great question. So it comes down to a few things. One, we're constantly tracking consumer behavior to understand the shifts as you kind of go period to period. And that allows us to get a keen understanding of how our guests are not only shopping across our brands, but also within our brands themselves. And gives us the agility to be more proactive with communication to influence behavior in the future. The other thing is we're always looking at trends in the marketplace. So you leverage a social database with social listening. You also leverage macroeconomic trends to predict where the market is going to go, and then start to marry those two together. So if there's food trends that we're seeing in the long term, we're preparing for those further out. If there's stuff that we're seeing in the short term, how do we innovate quickly to bring something to market that may be more on trend in the next 3 months versus what we know will be on trend in the next 12. And then underneath all of that is how do I price that effectively, right? And so what is that value proposition to the consumer? And I use the word value proposition because it's not just about price. There's a perception of price that exists. And so how do we kind of balance between where we should have value versus where we should have premiumization, but still providing value, whether or not that's through health or other means that the consumer perceives it that way. So that's kind of how we tie it all together.
Great answer, Jason. Next up, Hunt, how do you incorporate retailer feedback into pricing strategies without compromising your long-term revenue objectives?
That is a very good question. Feedback from retailers on pricing, especially now, it used to be mixed. It's not really mixed today, right? In terms of inflation, in terms of tariffs, right? There's a lot of challenges going on in the marketplace. I think one thing that I try to take to heart is, for lack of better words, how realistic is this feedback? Because there is cases where you're just going to get like a firm no to open up the door to negotiations and concessions. But there also has to be this lens of, did I get that right? Right? Ensuring that I'm holding myself accountable, looking at my past recommendations, right? In terms of taking a price increase. Like I always look, did it deliver what I thought it would? Right? Some cases it goes more, some cases it goes less, some cases maybe, and being transparent about that. So understanding that, yes, with this information we have and the systems and the tools, right, and the industry knowledge, right, these teams like Walmart, right, they have brilliant people working over there, and so their feedback is legitimate, right? It's biased. Both of our feedback is biased, but understanding how can we win together, and really like embracing the mindset that my customer is Walmart, right? And we are trying to win together, and I'm not trying to take a price advance that is going to profit me at your expense. Like we want to win together, we want to work together, we want to partner, and I feel that way about all of our retailers. No matter how loud or quiet they are, right? Everybody, to your point, not only on our team has a voice, but all of our customers should have a voice as well.
Oh, we can't hear
Sorry,
you,
you're on mute.
Saurabh.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Hunt, for that answer. Kelly, there's a question for you. How does a company ensure that a change in data strategy is incorporated effectively till the lowest level of
How is it the lowest level of what?
organization, the org?
Of the organization, change in data strategy.
Mhm.
Well, I am a firm believer that RGM, including data science, is a team sport. So everybody plays a role in it. As we change the data strategy, communication is key to success. And Jason is absolutely right. If you don't have a data engineer, you need one now. They're superheroes in managing data. But it goes down to communication. RGM It's not rocket science. The foundations and the principles have remained true. As we get more data and more data science at our fingertips, it's going to be important to continue to keep those lines of communication open, particularly with your IT and your security teams, as we put more of our company information into AI. So I would tell you, it's constant communication and helping bring the organization along the journey you're going on. Build a roadmap, have a vision, socialize that vision, ensure that you're listening to the feedback that people in the organization have, and you're incorporating it along the way. Because the adoption of the organization is what's going to make you more successful and allow you to build even further.
Sure. Thank you. Jason, there's a question which says, what are the most actionable insights you wish you had at your fingertips today, especially those that accelerate decision making or drive margin improvement?
I'd probably say, I want to make sure I manage what I say, but the most actionable insights that I think I'd love to see is like where really the consumer is going to be in the next 12 months, because there's so many macroeconomic factors that are happening in the marketplace today, and they're kind of like a light switch, like they're on 1 minute, they're off the next. And so it creates a lot of uncertainty. And you're seeing trends that indicate that folks are really gone in the savings mode, which could have an impact on the business in the future. We don't know, right? And so I'd love to understand where that consumer is really going to be in the next 12 months, because if I had that crystal ball, we could make a ton of decisions that I think would allow us to significantly outpace our competition. And so that would be, I think, the crystal ball view that I'd love to have.
No, definitely. Knowing where your customer is going or changing preferences in coming time is where you want to be before then. Kelly, there's one question for you, and I'll take just a couple of more, one for you and one for Hunt, and then we'll wrap it up. You talked about bringing commercial teams along the journey with forecasting. How do you manage disagreements when the data says one thing, but the gut instinct or market experience says another?
Well, we actually take the gut instinct into play. So we start with helping the commercial organization understand the data we're using. And we do the initial run of the forecasts. Then we bring in the commercial insights, and that allows them to influence the outcome, or believe they're influencing the outcome of what the data is telling us. When we put in those influences, sometimes it does influence when we put in the commercial insights, sometimes it does influence the outcome of the forecast. Sometimes it doesn't. So it's the listening component. It's hearing them, helping them know that they were heard, and then explaining that storytelling, helping them understand when we put those unique customer or channel